Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Chairman Costa and Ranking Member Johnson, for having this important hearing today. This is crucial to the ag industry as we know it. I'm glad that we're doing this subcommittee hearing. Frankly, I'd like to see this be a full committee hearing because I'm hard-pressed to think of any issue facing agriculture in America today that's more important than what we're seeing in the cattle markets and the importance of the beef industry specifically to American agriculture. It's also very important in my district. I represent the Big First, the largest beef producing district in the country. Our family's farmed and fed cattle for 120 years. I grew up in a small feed yard, preconditioning and doctoring sick calves. So this is near and dear to my heart personally as well. I'm also a proud K-Stater, and I'm really glad to see a lot of K-Staters here as well. And a lot of concerns about what we've seen over the last 20 months. My first question would really be to both Dr. Jacobs and Dr. Lusk. Congress and the USDA have allocated hundreds of millions in funding towards additional slaughter capacity to help small and medium meat and poultry processors over the last couple of years. Obviously, an announcement more recently as well. There's currently a shortage of shackle space, but as many of you have mentioned, that the cattle industry, like any business, is still subject to the basic economics of supply and demand. So my question really is this: how do we ensure that taxpayer dollars create the maximum shackle space possible? In other words, how do we spend these dollars the most efficiently to move the needle, so to speak? And Dr. Lusk and Jacobs, if you're Dr. Jacobs first, and then maybe Dr. Lusk, if you'd weigh in on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. These investments, I think what I would say is that I think these investments should perhaps think about focusing more on the indirect investments. So direct investment in shackle space, unless we know, for example, that gets these processors, these small and medium, to a point where they can be profitable on their own without the support and without the subsidization, I would question that. And that's why I think a study is needed to understand what are the minimum capacity requirements to get these processors, get small and medium scale. In other words, what is medium scale? What gets them to a minimum efficient scale where they can be profitable apart from subsidization? I do support the indirect investments in things like workforce development, ensuring we have the right policies in place, making sure that the playing field is leveled in terms of regulatory burden and regulatory requirements. But short of that, investments in shackle space are one-time. It's a one-time shot in the arm. And I would want to make sure that could be sustainable beyond any investment period.
Great. Thank you. Anything to add to that or any different perspective, Dr. Lusk?
Yeah, well, first, I appreciate the question to think about using taxpayer dollars wisely and efficiently. And I would agree with Dr. Jacobs. And the things that really come to mind is what do you do to increase the size of the pie to improve that overall demand? So some of it is market access issues. Increase that size of the pie by having access to more consumers in different parts of the world, or to improve quality and improve what consumers are willing to pay. That has a longer run benefit for the entire supply chain. And the other aspect too, I think, is innovation, productivity, improving innovation. Some of that we've talked about, the labor issues. That's a way to improve capacity. Effective capacity is maybe some automation there, but also just efficiency. I think there's, again, beef cattle is in competition with a variety of other foodstuffs, and we're in competition with producers all across the world for a place on consumers' dinner plates. And so we have to continue to find ways to be more efficient and make responsible use of our natural resources.
Yep, I agree. My last question would be for Dr. Ahern. Your testimony suggested that there is an exceptionally high likelihood that cow-calf producers would receive a lower price for their cattle if government mandates if the government would mandate certain required percentages of negotiated cash sales. Could you explain that more, and why do you believe that to be the case?
Certainly. So I think the first step is understanding the benefits that AMAs bring to the marketplace. As I've mentioned both in the testimony and in the earlier question, AMAs allow packers and cattle feeders to both reduce their supply chain risks, better manage inventory, better utilize their cattle feeding and cattle processing capacity, and reduce their marketing and procurement costs. Both of those sectors of the beef industry are margin operators, So the price that they're willing to pay for the upstream input into their production system is very much determined by what their operating costs are. If we increase operating costs at the packer level, packers are likely to pay less for fat cattle. If we reduce the price of fat cattle and increase the operating costs of feedlots, then they are likely to pay less for calves and feeder cattle. So I readily admit that price discovery is necessary, but we have to recognize that it does have a cost, and if we eliminate or reduce the benefits of AMAs, that also has a cost. And with cow-calf producers being primary producers and not margin operators, they have no one else to pass on the burden of that cost.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you all. I see my time has expired, so I yield back. Thank you.